welcome back to another episode of Sit Down with Dale. Today we are going to be talking about team collaboration and what that looks like in a work from anywhere world. First of all, we're going to, discuss what that looks like. What does it mean to be able to work from anywhere in a sort of secure way?
So, Paige, I guess I'd start by framing what we actually determine as or define as collaboration, if you like, and that's any way that you actually work with a teammate on the same topic at the same time thereabouts. So, if I talk about the old days, and by the old days I mean probably pre-2020, we used to talk about collaboration was in maybe a small meeting room, maybe the whiteboard, a flip chart, a group of people together, and you talked about the problem at hand and you hypothesised how that could be fixed, and then you worked through what that solution looked like. Then along came all of these scenarios and situations of 2020 through to 2024 when we weren't allowed to collaborate, we weren't allowed to work in the same room, and we had to come up with ways that we could still get the advantages of being able to collaborate and work together, and how we do that electronically and over distance. And what a lot of people found over that time is tools such as Zoom or Microsoft Teams allowed you to be present with one another, but they weren't necessarily great tools to be able to work on a common problem. And obviously over the last couple of years we've actually gotten technologies now that bolt into those sorts of applications that allow us to have virtual whiteboards, breakout rooms where you can go and take a subtopic of what you're working on and a smaller group of people and work through that. We've now got really great tools that allow us to record everything that happens in those sessions and transcribe that and make it available then for future reference, all automatically. So, what's collaboration? Collaboration is any technology that allows you to be physically remote but virtually present with your team and able to focus and work on a single topic at the same time. So, for us, that's what we define as collaboration. It's the things that bring us together and allow us to be effective in actually addressing situations.
And so now that we've got what it means to collaborate, how are we going about that in a way that we can do it securely, and using systems like SASE, for example? What does that mean to be, not the way that we would know SASE, but what is it?
So I guess first and foremost is, why do we look at security as a almost like a foundational part of collaboration? And it really comes back to why we collaborate. Generally if you're collaborating with your team, you're working on a problem that can't be solved alone. So it's something unique, something competitive, or something that's highly sensitive that you need to work through. So that's not information that you want to be necessarily broadcast to the rest of the world or accidentally available to other people. So you've got to look at then within your collaboration toolset, how can you guarantee that the people who are in that collaboration session are meant to be there, and that the data that you're actually capturing, recording, working on remains within those privacy settings. And a couple of those techniques, one of them that you've already touched on, which is SASE, and it's SASE rather than SASSY. It stands for Secure Access, Secure Edge. And really that's an adaptation of the old corporate firewall, and when everybody's in the office you're automatically protected. SASE is a technology that allows you to have a centralised firewall but distributed access to that firewall, and then use that technology to be able to inspect and validate that all network traffic coming from a set of devices is actually legitimate traffic. So that's one aspect of it. Obviously the other part of that is making sure that you know who's on that particular collaboration session. So how do you manage identity? How do you know that those 5 people in that room are who they say they are? And part of that comes down to correct identity management. So things like your usernames, your passwords, your multi-factor authentication, knowing where they're coming from. So for example, there's been a couple of court cases in the US where there's been inadvertent system access provided to foreign state actors. I'm not saying that that's normal for everybody, but that came about through, in some respects, poor credential management and access control practices within those organisations. that is part of the overall security settings around collaboration. Know who's supposed to be on that call, and how do you actually validate that they are who they say they are. Then obviously you've got the SASE component of that, which is really dealing with knowing the device and securing the transport layer, so that the traffic that's going from one point to the next is actually private and is not likely to be intercepted. And then the final part of the security story around this is, what do you actually do with that information that's been discussed or collaborated on? How do you store that? How do you make sure that it's only used for the purpose for which it's meant? And that oftentimes, if you're working in, say, a Microsoft Teams environment, will come down to what they call sensitivity tagging within that environment, where each channel or each conversation or each collaboration session is actually given a confidentiality label, and there's a set of policies around that then describe what can actually happen with that, whether it's within that team that's worked on it, or whether it's within that team plus an external collaboration environment, or whether it's just open for the entire organisation, or whether it could even be publicly available information. And all of that works together to maintain, I guess you'd say, the sanctity of that collaboration environment.
And so we've now, you mentioned Teams. Within that, there's the opportunity to make like chats and channels and having shared folders and things like that. From a broader sort of Microsoft 365 workspace, how should we be going about that? How do we get people to know what goes where, and is this something I should send a chat to someone to? Is this something I should email someone about? Where should information be put, and how do we know what's what?
Look, this is the ultimate can of worms in some respects. In terms of collaboration, I say straight up, email is not a collaboration tool. It is a point-to-point communication mechanism, and it should be only used for formalisation of items that have already been collaborated on. So it's sort of the invitation to a collaboration session, or perhaps the confirmation of the outcome from the collaboration session. If you're talking in a Microsoft Teams specific way, then the difference between a chat and a channel and a team really comes down to the longevity of the information contained within that. So you can certainly use a chat window to collaborate on an ad hoc basis. The challenge then becomes, if you try and add a new member to that chat, that new member won't be privy to any of the previous correspondence. So it becomes quite time limited. If you then remove somebody from that chat, context is lost again. If you use a channel within a team, the channel is a more permanent record of everything that's happened around that particular construct, if you like. So I'd liken it the difference to a chat is, in the old days, what you used to have when you walked down a corridor and you bumped into somebody on the way to the coffee room, you'd have a chat. It was almost inconsequential. It wasn't necessarily commercial, or it might be we need to catch up and talk about this, but then you take that into a more formalised environment. The chat functionality in Teams or Slack and things like that is exactly that. It's more informal. Your channel structure is more around that formal, we need to meet and talk about situation X, and that can be, your channels can mimic a virtual team in a business, or a function within a business. For example, internally within Microsolve, we have a channel that deals with our operations environment, or a team that deals with our operations environment, and within that we've got a channel that deals with our incidents and escalations. Within that channel, that's where our ops team will call out something that needs to be escalated and then dealt with collaboratively across the team, or in fact the entire organisation. And that's a formal structure where we can go back and review every bit of correspondence about that collaboration in there, irrespective of who's been added or removed from that channel. So the channel's essentially a permanent record, whereas a chat itself is not. As you add and remove, the context goes away. And you did mention SharePoint. Really, really important to understand that Microsoft Teams, in a lot of respects, is in essence a front end to SharePoint. So all of the files and everything that you would share or collaborate on within in a channel in Microsoft Teams are actually stored within SharePoint. and you can then go and actually define that SharePoint structure to mimic what appears in Teams, and give people the flexibility of choice as to how they actually access that information, whether they do it through a Teams front end or whether in fact they go to the SharePoint back end, or even in fact whether they use OneDrive for Business to actually go and look at those underlying documents. So that the whole thing works together really nicely.
So obviously the tools that we're using are important, and we need to know what we've got in front of us to be able to figure out how to use it. So we've spoken about the tools. Now the other side of it is getting people into the mindset of where everything goes, and how do we continue to collaborate as people rather than having the tools collaborate with each other in a standalone. And how do we get people knowing and being across what they need to be across when they're not sitting across from each other like we are right now? If we've got a lot of people who work from home, and home is across multiple different suburbs or LGAs or wherever, states, and we've got people who might be more mobile, they're going out to clients, they're going all across, racking up those kilometres. How do we make sure that everyone has the information that they need to have? Say we're in a call or a Teams meeting, how do we get that information to them in an efficient and safe manner, so that you're not having to go, oh, what was said in that meeting? I don't remember. I was too busy navigating traffic, or I was, had the dog going in the background.
Look, there's no one simple answer to that conundrum. Part of it comes down to structure. So ideally you want to set up your collaboration environment. Let's take Teams for example. How do you structure Teams to work the way your business runs? So there is no one size fits all, because every business operates in a different way, but there are some foundational things that you can look at in terms of, businesses are generally structured around either a geographic line or a functional line, or a hybrid between the two. So you structure your Teams environment to have your teams and your channels that actually mimic that type of setup. So people will generally understand that my normal office location is let's say Wollongong. So you might have a team called Wollongong, and within that you would have the channels for the various functions that then operate out of the Wollongong office. You might also have let's say a team that's called finance, and within your finance team you would have channels for your receivables, your payables, your asset list and things like that. So you sort of try and mimic as much as possible your collaboration environment setup around the way your business operates, so that there's a natural affinity between people and the underlying structure that they're actually dealing with. You want to make this as simple to understand as possible. So once you've got a structure that works, it then really comes down to the aspects of cultural change and how you onboard and educate people, and really that starts with that entire onboarding process. So if you've got an existing workforce and you're rolling out a foundational change like moving to a collaboration first environment, that really comes down to the education and working with your team as to what this actually means on a practical level. If you're used to going to the J drive and navigating to this folder, well, what does that look like in a collaboration environment? And it may well be that instead of going to the folder and opening the file, well, you go to your recent list in Teams and you go, that's the file I'm after, go for it. Or it might be that you go to your search bar and go, well, I'm actually looking for an accounting reconciliation file, and you search for reconciliation and it'll bring up a list of all of those files. So functionally you can do the same sorts of things, but it's really around that education piece and the onboarding of your staff to make sure that they understand how the tool operates, what's different from what they're used to, and how that plays out in a practical sense. The beauty of things like Teams and SharePoint as collaboration tools is they actually simplify how you find information, and they simplify how you access that information, while also being able to secure the access from remote locations. Doing away with VPNs, for example, or other remote access tools. You're able to do that within the one environment. So you can be on the road, you can have your mobile phone with you, and if you've got a work profile set up with, let's say your Teams environment, and you're logged in, you can access everything in that channel, including all of the files, from that phone on the road. So there's no need to pull out your laptop, fire up your VPN, log into the server, look for the file and then try and download it and access it. No, you just go straight into Teams on your phone. That's what I'm looking for, there it is. File format, sorry, the screen format might be a little bit different, but you've got access to that information. So that's, that's those two parts of that structure, and then the cultural aspects of education and upskilling of your team. And that really deals with that. If you then move into the practicalities of, let's say, a closed collaboration session, some of the technology available within the platforms themselves allow you to have policies set up that every meeting between more than one or between two or more people is automatically recorded, is automatically transcribed, and the actions out of that can then automatically be put into the calendar of the person that is responsible for that. So you really then start to cut down on your administrative time around your collaboration sessions. And we've found that across a variety of different platforms, Teams being one, Zoom another, where you can use those tools to really eliminate the time delay between the end of a meeting and then being able to actually start work on the action items. So, rather than having somebody responsible for writing the minutes, distributing them, getting agreement, and then assigning action tasks, that's literally happening in real time. So that latent time between end of meeting and start of work goes from perhaps 2 or 3 days down to 15 minutes.
Yeah, wow.
So your velocity of delivery increases enormously by using these tools. And obviously then your recordings and everything, you're able to go and associate those with, let's say your line of business applications. For us, our ticketing software or even our sales system, you're able to take that information and you're able to have that associated with the correct account or the correct person, and really build that rich history of what's actually been worked on and having it in one place. So the technology enables so much more than just having everything in Teams. It's really about that velocity of work and being able to deliver outcomes very, very quickly in a very, very rich format.
Yeah, so make sure reach out, have a look at some of our web pages. We've got heaps of information on this. You can check out some of our other videos and check out the description below for some more information as well. Thank you.
Thank you.